Hello, everyone. Andrew Farr here, Managing Editor of Water Finance and Management. And first and foremost, I hope everyone is staying safe, staying healthy out there. And obviously, we're in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic that is really just seems to be affecting everyone at the minute. Individuals, businesses, families, and certainly water and wastewater utilities are being affected. A lot of people right now, obviously taking advantage of the video chatting and the video conferencing. So we thought we would get into a little bit of that today. We're going to be producing some more of these video clips to try and keep you apprised of the news, and also just to bring you some good discussions about what's going on. So today we thought that we would chat with our friend and colleague, Greg Baird. Greg is the president of the Water Finance Research Foundation. He is a longtime contributor of Water Finance and Management. And Greg, you've had experience working in municipal finance as a water utility CFO out in Colorado. And since, you've done a ton of consulting work from, everything from asset management to water utility finance. So, glad to have you here today to chat a little bit about this. How are you holding up over there?
Doing really well. I mean, like everybody else, you're hunkering down, you're doing the social distancing. You think, okay, you have everything in place until there's not toilet paper at the store or something. Or here in Utah, when we got that 5.7 earthquake, you thought, wow, pandemic and now earthquake on top of that. How prepared are we really? And it really starts testing all of our planning.
Absolutely. I mean, what we're into now is just totally unprecedented. So it's been tough. And like I said, so let's get into a little bit of what's going on with our water and sewer systems. And Greg, you wrote our April cover story. That's going to be out this month, and if you're watching this video, you can view the article at the link below, and it'll be available on waterfm.com. And so, Greg, let's talk about a couple things that you discuss in your article. To start off, why don't you just give us a little bit of insight as to, kind of in general, what are the guidelines that water and wastewater systems follow when there's an emergency situation like this, like a pandemic? What are kind of the first steps, and what are they kind of dealing with right now?
Okay, well, we first have to remember that, emergency preparedness for water and wastewater utilities is actually a big deal. But when we look at, say, the AWWA survey, the State of the Industry survey for 2019, we have repair and replacement of infrastructure that's been number one for many years, but number 9 was emergency preparedness. And the philosophy that utilities really had was effectively, we're worried about natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, and the number one natural disaster that occurs is really flooding, that water utilities and wastewater utilities really have to deal with it. So back in 2007, we have to realize that only about 15% of the larger water utilities actually had emergency plans that addressed pandemic issues. And even when the 2018 AWA, American Water Infrastructure Act, basically started telling everybody you need to do risk and resilience and emergency preparedness plans, it was all based on infrastructure. It wasn't necessarily how do you protect your human capital, the people, your staff, from these different issues. And so it's forced everybody to actually re-examine what has traditionally been considered a very low likelihood with a huge output, but how do you really plan for it? So now everybody's forced to say, wow, instead of just checking the box of, a pandemic might happen, but maybe not in my lifetime, now all of a sudden it's like all of our operational plans have to start addressing that. And that's a big shockwave for all the utilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine that, those plans might even have to, get some revision after this is all said and done. They're going to have to examine, what worked and what didn't.
Yeah, I think people start realizing that if absenteeism or staff shortage is the biggest issue, they might have already identified essential staff, but they hadn't really considered all of the legal issues or other sick leave and family policy issues, because if your family's sick, essentially an essential staff might need to now be quarantined at home with her family. So it's not just how do you protect the staff person, it's now a family and it's a community issue.
Yeah. Well, let's switching gears slightly to the finance side of things, because there's a couple. I mean, there's a few different ways that these utilities are being affected. So, seeing as how, I mean, kind of right now, there's no end in sight with this pandemic. There's kind of, we're kind of seemingly, going downhill every day. The news is kind of getting worse every day. What might be some of the short and long-term financial implications that they might have to deal with?
Well, I think first of all, when you think water and wastewater utilities, you have to realize that for water utilities, 85% of them are owned or controlled by a local government. So you have to look at what's happening to a local government and what are their reactions, because a lot of those financial practices and policies get pushed onto the water and wastewater utility. So it's the general fund versus maybe the water fund and the sewer fund. Different funding sources, but at the same time, kind of, in commonalities with their financial policies. Lessons learned from the Great Recession was essentially that a lot of people, they used their reserves initially because they weren't quite sure what to do. About 46 to 48% of the top 100 water utilities have a fiscal year that starts on July 1st. So they're coming through most of their budget. They're going to use their reserves. They're going to start cutting back on O&M costs because they're seeing a huge impact for the revenues not coming in. So that financial impact is, how can you reduce expenses, protect your staff, at the same time you still want to be able to maybe issue debt sometime in the future, and you have to meet your bond obligations. So they're really paying attention to their financial metrics, such as the debt ratio calculation, because revenues are going down, expenditures are going up, and where are they going to cut? You go reserves first, and then you start looking at what other cuts you need to make.
Right. And so the third part, the third thing that I wanted to ask you about, as long as we're talking about this, and a big part of your article that you get into is, kind of digital technologies, digital solutions. This has been a huge discussion really in the industry, all pandemics aside, for a while now. Utilities are looking to implement a range of technologies to make operations, more efficient, better decision making, and that's even happened on the financial management side of things too. So I guess in general speaking, how can digital technologies assist for what's going on right now, and also to help mitigate these sorts of things in the future?
Well, I think I have to say, well, what are our lessons learned from the Great Recession? We froze jobs, then we laid those jobs off, and that lowest part was essentially maintenance people. So the next thing you know, we have all of this infrastructure that's helping us provide services, municipal services, water, wastewater, storm, and now we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot because we're not maintaining the infrastructure that we had. We weren't sure how long the recession was going to be, kind of like the uncertainty that we're dealing with right now. But we started seeing premature asset failure. We started seeing O&M costs going up because the condition of those different assets started degrading. So when you start talking about how can we do this differently, and we look at life cycle costing and asset management practices, we have to throw down and say, we now know more about that. And when we think of smart water, smart sewer, digital water technologies, that's one of the main key ingredients that we didn't necessarily have those technologies a decade ago, but we do now. We have out-of-the-box solutions where we can set up sensors and be able to, monitor our pipelines and our pump stations. And this remote monitoring gives us the ability to be able to have a awareness of what's going on in the system to protect source water and water treatment, distribution. And we can do that while we can be able to protect our staff, considering the uncertainty of the virus that we're still learning a lot about. Yeah. So digital technology, smart pumps, asset management, data analytics, machine learning, all of these different aspects really start, playing into how can we maintain long-term affordability as well as meet the current issues and risks associated with COVID-19.
Yes, yeah. And I'm sure this is, that'll be an ongoing discussion, and, that will be, continue to be talked about, how these sorts of digital solutions can continue to assist with operations, but how to help us better prepare, for the next time there's a situation like this. But Greg, I'm sure we'll get more into this in some future videos. We can kind of dig a little deeper into this, but thanks a lot for chatting with us for a little bit. And so for everybody out there, again, stay safe and stay healthy. And a big thanks for all of our water operators, wastewater operators across the country, that are out there still going into work and keeping these systems running. We always talk about how this, the water infrastructure sector, this is, unseen infrastructure, and, a lot of people don't think about it. And I think that applies right now as well. It's not something that people are thinking about, but, we're lucky that we have, tap water is safe to drink and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, I really like how we can start really understanding the importance and the value of water. And more importantly, sometimes it's just not the value of the water, but the people behind keeping the water flowing.
Yeah.
And that's what's critical right now for our public health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Greg. Well, thanks again. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for having me.